children, this is my birthday, December 11th, 1890. I am 80 years old today. I was born at King's Iron Works in Sullivan County, Tennessee, December the 11th, 1810. I grew into manhood fishing in Beaver Creek and roaming through the forest, hunting the deer, the wild boar, and the timber wolf, often spending weeks at a time in the solitary wilderness with no companions but my rifle, hunting knife, and a small hatchet that I carried in my belt in all of my wilderness wanderings. On these long hunting trips, I met and became acquainted with many of the Cherokee Indians, hunting with them by day and sleeping around their campfires by night. I learned to speak their language, and they taught me the arts of trailing and building traps and snares. On one of my long hunts in the fall of 1829, I found a young Cherokee who had been shot by a roving band of hunters and who had eluded his pursuers and concealed himself under a shelving rock. Weak from loss of blood, the poor creature was unable to walk and almost famished for water. I carried him to a spring, bathed and bandaged the bullet wound, built a shelter out of bark peeled from a dead chestnut tree, nursed and protected him, feeding him on chestnuts and roasted deer meat. When he was able to travel, I accompanied him to the home of his people and remained so long that I was given up for lost. By this time, I had become an expert rifleman and fairly good archer and a good trapper, and spent most of my time in the forest in quest of game. The removal of the Cherokee Indians from their lifelong homes in the year of 1838 found me a young man in the prime of life and a private soldier in the American Army. Being acquainted with many of the Indians and able to fluently speak their language, I was sent as an interpreter into the Smoky Mountain country in May 1838 and witnessed the execution of the most brutal order in the history of American warfare. I saw the helpless Cherokees arrested and dragged from their homes and driven at the bayonet point into the stockades. And in the chill of a drizzling rain on an October morning, I saw them loaded like cattle or sheep into 645 wagons and started toward the west. One can never forget the sadness and solemnity of that morning. Chief John Ross led in prayer, and when the bugles sounded and the wagons started rolling, many of the children rose to their feet and waved their little hands goodbye to their mountain homes, knowing they were leaving them forever. Many of these helpless people did not have blankets, and many of them had been driven from home barefooted. On the morning of November the 17th, we encountered a terrific sleet and snowstorm with freezing temperatures, and from that day until we reached the end of the fateful journey on March the 26th, 1839, the sufferings of the Cherokee were awful. The trail of the exiles was a trail of death. They had to sleep in the wagons and on the ground without fire. And I have known as many as 22 of them to die in one night of pneumonia due to ill treatment, cold, and exposure. Among this number was the beautiful Christian wife of Chief John Ross. This noble-hearted woman died a martyr to childhood, giving her only blanket for the protection of a sick child. She rode thinly clad through a blinding sleet and snowstorm, developed pneumonia, and died in the still hours of a bleak winter night, with her head resting on Lieutenant Gregg's saddle blanket. I made the long journey to the west with the Cherokees, and I did all that a private soldier could do to alleviate their sufferings. When on guard duty at night, I have many times walked my beat in my blouse in order that some sick child might have the warmth of my overcoat. I was on guard the night Mrs. Ross died. When relieved at midnight, I did not retire, but remained around the wagon out of sympathy for Chief Ross, and at daylight was detailed by Captain McClellan to assist in the burial, like the other unfortunates who died on the way. Her uncoffined body was buried in a shallow grave at the roadside, far from her native mountain home. And the sorrowing cavalcade moved on. Being a young man, I mingled freely with the young women and girls. I spent many pleasant hours with them, and was supposed to be under my blanket. They have many times sung their mountain songs for me, this being all that they could do to repay my kindness. And with all my association with the Indian girls from October 1829 to March 26, 1839, I did not meet one who was a moral prostitute. They are kind and tender-hearted. Many of them are beautiful. The only trouble that I had with anybody on the entire journey to the West was a brutal teamster by the name of Ben McDonnell was using his whip on an old feeble Cherokee to hasten him into the wagon. The sight of that old, nearly blind creature quivering under the lashes of a bullwhip was too much for me. I attempted to stop McDonnell, and it ended in a personal encounter. He lashed me across the face, the wire tip on his whip cutting a bad gash in my cheek. The little hatchet that I carried in my hunting days was in my belt, and MacDonald was carried unconscious from the scene. I was placed under guard, but Ensign Henry Bullock and Private Elkanah Millard had both witnessed the encounter. They gave Captain McClellan the facts, and I was never brought to trial. Years later, I met Second Lieutenant Riley and Ensign Bullock at Bristol at John Robertson's show. And Bullock jokingly reminded me that there was a case still pending against me before a court-martial, and wanted to know how much longer I was going to have the trial put off. MacDonald finally recovered, and in the year 1851 was running on a boat out of Memphis. The long, painful journey to the West ended March 26th, 1839, with 4,000 silent graves reaching from the foothills of the Smoky Mountains to what is known as Indian Territory in the West. And covetousness on the part of the white race was the cause of all that the Cherokee had to suffer. Ever since Ferdinand de Soto made his journey through the Indian country in the year 1540, there had been a tradition of a rich gold mine somewhere in the Smoky Mountain country. I think the tradition was true. In the year of 1828, a little Indian boy living on Ward Creek had sold a gold nugget to a white trader, and that nugget sealed the doom of the Cherokee. In a short time, the country was overrun with armed brigands claiming to be government agents who paid no attention to the rights of the Indians, who were the legal possessors of the country. Chief Junaluska was personally acquainted with President Andrew Jackson. Junaluska had taken 500 of the flower of his Cherokee scouts and helped Jackson to win the Battle of the Horseshoe, leaving 33 of them dead on the field. And in that battle, Junaluska had drove his tomahawk through the skull of a Creek warrior, when the Creek had Jackson at his mercy. Chief John Ross sent Junaluska as an envoy to plead with President Jackson for protection for his people, but Jackson's manner was cold and indifferent toward the rugged son of the forest who had saved his life. He met Junaluska, heard his plea, but curtly said, "Sir, your audience is ended. There is nothing I can do for you." The doom of the Cherokee was sealed. Washington, D.C. had decreed that they must be driven west, and their lands given to the white man. And in May 1838, an army of 4,000 regulars and 3,000 volunteer soldiers under command of General Winfield Scott marched into the Indian country and wrote the blackest chapter on the pages of American history. Men working in the fields were arrested and driven to the stockades. Women were dragged from their homes by soldiers whose language they could not understand. Children were often separated from their parents and driven into the stockades with the sky for a blanket and the earth for a pillow. And often the old and infirm were prodded with bayonets to hasten them to the stockades. In one home, death had come during the night. A little sad-faced child had died and was lying on a bearskin couch, and some women were preparing the little body for burial. All were arrested and driven out, leaving the child in the cabin. I don't know who buried the body. In another home was a frail mother, apparently a widow, and 3 small children, one just a baby. When told that she must go, the mother gathered the children at her feet, prayed in humble prayer in her native tongue, and patted the old family dog on the head, told the faithful creature goodbye, with the baby strapped on her back and leading a child with each hand, started on her exile. The task was too great for the frail mother. A stroke of heart relieved her sufferings. she sunk and died with her baby on her back and her 2 children clinging to her hands. Chief Junaluska witnessed this scene, the tears gushing down his cheeks. Lifting his cap, he turned his face toward the heavens and said, "Oh, my God, if I had known at the Battle of the Horseshoe what I know now, American history would have been differently written." At this time, 1890, we are too near to the removal of the Cherokees for our young people to fully understand the enormity of the crime that was committed against a helpless race. Truth is, the facts are being concealed from the young people of today. Some school children of today do not know that we are living on lands that were taken from a helpless race at the bayonet point to satisfy the white man's greed for gold. Future generations will read and condemn the act, and I do hope posterity will remember that private soldiers like myself had to execute the orders of our superiors. We had no choice in the matter. 25 years after the removal, it was my privilege to meet a large company of the Cherokee in uniform of the Confederate Army under command of Colonel Thomas. They were encamped at Zollicoffer. I went to see them. Most of them were just boys at the time of the removal, but they instantly recognized me as the soldier that was good to us. From them I learned that Chief John Ross was still ruler of the nation in 1863. I wonder if he's still living. He was a noble-hearted fellow and suffered a lot for his race. At one time, he was arrested and thrown into a dirty jail in an effort to break his spirit. He remained true to his people and led them in prayer when they started on their exile. And his Christian wife sacrificed her life for a little girl who had pneumonia. The Anglo-Saxon race would build a towering monument to perpetuate her noble act in giving her only blanket for comfort of a sick child. Incidentally, the child recovered. But Mrs. Ross is sleeping in an unmarked grave far from her native Smoky Mountain home. When Scott invaded the Indian country, some of the Cherokee fled to caves and dens in the mountains and were never captured. And they are there today. I've long intended going there and trying to find them, but I've put off going from year to year, and now I'm too feeble to ride that far. The fleeting years have come and gone, and old age has overtaken me. I can truthfully say that neither my rifle nor my knife are stained with Cherokee blood. I can truthfully say that I did my best for them when they certainly did need a friend. 25 years after the removal, I still live in their memories, the soldier who was good to us. However, murder is murder, whether committed by the villain skulking in the dark, or by uniformed men stepping to the strains of martial music. Murder is murder, and somebody must answer. Somebody must explain the streams of blood that flowed in the Indian country in the summer of 1838. Somebody must explain the 4,000 silent graves that marked the trail of the Cherokees to their exile. I wish I could forget it all, but the picture of 645 wagons lumbering over the frozen ground with their cargo of suffering humanity still lingers in my memory. Let the historian of a future day tell the sad story with its sighs, its tears, and dying groans. Let the great judge of all the earth weigh our actions and reward us according to our work. My children, thus ends my promised birthday story. This December the 11th, 1890. John G. Burnett.
Hannes gede digalea dis Hannes keloska Hannes musteg with the Saginos Hannes wait gesha Hannes.
Our people were covering portions of what is now 8 southern states, and their population was estimated to be around 45,000. At that time, they were recognized as the largest and the most powerful nation east of the Mississippi River.
Sound of Cherokee. Cherokee Indians and Cherokee, North Carolina.
We have a total today of 56,000 acres of land in this area, and all of this was purchased by our people from the state of North Carolina at $40 per acre, and this land was accumulated over a long period of years. Now today we have just one deed for the land, and this is in the name of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians.
In this small part of the once great Cherokee nation, 4,000 Cherokee people still live, still walk the mountain paths and along the few paved roads, still fish the mountain streams, still work at old and ancient crafts, and more at modern industry, still worship the Christian God, still govern themselves democratically, and still live the watchword of peace. An 85-year-old Cherokee woman recalls,
I could follow my grandma's sister. I used to go with her when she go hunt the roots and everything to say. She's old. Then she used to tell me a story a little bit and what kind of medicine to get. Somebody was hurting some way, and he told me to get this kind of medicine to make an herbs. I learned from her, you know. I used to love old people, but they don't now.
a Cherokee man with several years of college builds with some of the young men.
For one thing, a lot of them have dropped out of school, and a lot of them have no other way to get an education or acquire a skill. So I think that in order to make good citizens, like I've been taught since I was a child, is to reach our youth. Well, I'm kind of proud of the boys that we have had over the past year. I've been up there, and I've been gratified by seeing boys leave, go out with 4-year scholarships to industrial schools and other technical schools, and also I've seen one or two go off to colleges. And we had one boy there particularly I'm proud of, because when this boy first came here, he couldn't have held a job anywhere in the United States. His attitude and his educational levels were low. And I talked to this boy several times, He began listening to me, and he turned out to be one of the top corpsmen we've had there, and he went to resident worker school. He made exceptional grades, and he came back, and he is now one of the staff.
A Cherokee mother has hope in her son.
My son wants to be a doctor when he grows up, as he has often told me, and I wish that it would stay in his mind when he grows up.
And Cherokee boys have plans.
I'm in the 5th grade and I'm going on even to college. I'm in the 4th grade. I want to be a pilot and fly a jet.
The Cherokee people dreaming, working, building, and worshiping in this mountain land that has been their home for 500 years or more. Here in a wooden Baptist church in Birdtown, only a mile and a half from the busy highway west of Fontana, a Cherokee man preaches in his native tongue. But the Cherokee language, seldom used in the modern 20th century world, is disappearing from the heritage of this noble people. Some of the older Cherokee people still do not speak English. They may understand the language, but do not speak it. In those homes, the children and the grandchildren learn to speak their own tongue from an elder. And sing it. And read it. For the Cherokee are the only American Indian tribe to have their own written language, invented by the wise Sequoyah. There are many stories of why Sequoyah set out to create a written form of the Cherokee language, but we do know he devoted 12 years or more in the challenge against the ridicule and outright opposition of family and friends. Sequoyah, born of a full-blooded Cherokee mother and a white father, probably Nathaniel Gist, a famous soldier and scout, lived his childhood with his mother in a Cherokee settlement. As a young man, he went with other Cherokee youths and the leader, Junaluska, to aid Andrew Jackson in the fight against the Creeks at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. In negotiations with the federal government, Sequoyah represented the Cherokee time after time, and in treaties broken by the political change and the unkept promises of the government, too far from the Cherokee hills and valleys. But of all his works among the Cherokee people, none was such a giant step as the invention of the alphabet or syllabary. First, Sequoyah envisioned a mark for each word. Girl.
A Kahuza.
Boy.
A Chuza.
Woman.
Ageya.
Man.
Askaya.
Crow.
Koga.
Dove.
Kuledishkonihi.
Screech owl.
Wahuhu.
Great owl.
Ugu.
Medicine.
Nauti.
House.
Galchode.
Fox.
Jula.
Hello.
Siyo.
But a symbol for each word became a cumbersome list of marks which few could ever hope to remember. Then Sequoia tried a symbol for a sentence.
Hakla de Jana.
You know, it's sky, goes to its ton.
But there were so many ways to make a sentence. Eventually, as he listened to the spoken Cherokee, this man Sequoia, who himself could not read in any language, put down a mark for the sounds he heard. 85 separate marks. It is told that once, when he ran out of ideas for new marks, he happened on a page of English, perhaps from an old newspaper which one of the white settlers carried, and from that print he used many of the crooked marks for symbols to represent sounds in the Cherokee language. 85 symbols to represent all the sounds in the Cherokee language. There was a great deal of interest in this way of putting down the language, and some of his friends wanted to learn. Soon they learned and taught others, and some of the quicker ones learned to read and write in 3 or 4 days. So in 1818, Sequoia was able to take written messages from Cherokee in the Arkansas settlement to Eastern Cherokee in Alabama. 10 years later, in the year 1828, with the help of Elias Boudinot as editor and the guiding hand of the missionary Reverend Samuel Worcester, the Cherokee printed the Phoenix, their first newspaper, in Cherokee and in English. Already someone had begun to translate the Bible into Cherokee, and so you will still find it being read in the homes and churches of Cherokee today. But again, Sequoia went with a delegation to appeal to the federal government for help in defending the lands and people from the land-hungry and gold-greedy white men who had attacked their homes, pillaged their villages, and taken over their fertile valleys. Treaties, beginning even with the land agreement of the Cherokee and the British in 1730, had pushed the Cherokee back from the banks of the freshwater streams, up from the fertile valleys, and into warring with the invading white men. By the end of the Revolutionary War, the Cherokee had lost their land in West Virginia and Virginia, had been driven out of South Carolina, and were left with only a few hundred miles of the western corner of North Carolina, a portion of North Georgia, and a small eastern corner of Tennessee. But the new leaders stood for peace, a peace that held fast when Tecumseh tried to organize an army of Indian tribes to fight the whites in 1811, a pledge to peace that almost destroyed them. For in 1835, another treaty was signed by a few, ceding all the remaining Cherokee land to the federal government for 50 cents an acre, and land in Oklahoma. The cries of such men as Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, and Sam Houston went unheeded, and Congress ratified that treaty. John Burnett, a soldier in the United States Army and assigned to the removal of the Cherokee to Oklahoma, recalled,
I saw the helpless Cherokees arrested and dragged from their homes and driven at the bayonet point into the stockades. And in the chill of a drizzling rain on an October morning, I saw them loaded like cattle or sheep into 645 wagons and started toward the west. One can never forget the sadness and solemnity of that morning. Chief John Ross led in prayer, and when the bugles sounded and the wagons started rolling, many of the children rose to their feet and waved their little hands goodbye to their mountain homes, knowing they were leaving them forever. The long, painful journey to the west ended March 26th, 1839, with 4,000 silent graves reaching from the foothills of the Smoky Mountains to what is known as Indian Territory in the west.
The march that was named for all history, the Trail of Tears. Back in the mountains of western Carolina and eastern Tennessee, amid that peculiar atmosphere that gave its name to these age-old mountains, smokiness still hung over the homes of those who had hidden and were free to remain. Up from the chimneys, smoke again curled and drifted, following the smooth green curves of the ancient Smoky Mountains. Back in the coves and down the narrow valleys, fresh green budded on maple and wild cherry, and mountain streams rushed by the whiteness of dogwood and blossom, and pink and purple of rhododendron. Once again, the young men hunted the deer and the black bear with the bite of a flint-tipped arrow, the spit of a blowgun, and the crack of the rifle. Again, the grating of stone on stone pulverized corn for bread. In the cabins, the crackle of corn and the sizzle of bean bread as the women cooked over an open fire. Women began to sing again as they made baskets from white oak strips and river cane. And the young braves met to defend the honor of their clans in the rugged and tortuous Indian ball games. Young, strong men from the clans of Deer and Paint and Bird and Wolf. Today, the main thoroughfare is paved, and from spring beauty until frost blackens the forest color, visitors come by the thousands to enjoy the fresh coolness of the Smokies and the shocking cold of swimming in the mountain streams, where rubber-booted fishermen wade in to cast their lines for the evasive bass and mountain trout. And they come to see the Indians. Cherokee don the brightly feathered garb of other tribes to fit the Western movie's image, getting more tourist attention than the full-blooded Cherokee, authentically dressed in the headband with a single feather, which was the mark of this great tribe. Yes, they come from the mills and farms of north and south, the schools and towns of east and west, to this crossroads. By the thousands each summer they assemble in the Mountainside Theater to live and drama the story of the Cherokee trying to live in peace with the white man.
The name of our village is Oconaluftee. Oconaluftee means beside the river.
And visitors walk the paths of the Oconaluftee village, where Cherokee tell and show in authentic dress of the ways of their ancestors 200 years ago, when the colonies were fighting for independence. And the people of our generation wonder at the eternal flame, the continuous fire of hope which traveled the Trail of Tears in 1838 from the Smoky Mountain hearth to Sallisaw, Oklahoma, and was brought back to burn again in the Smokies by a delegation of 7 Cherokee men who retraced the Trail of Tears in 1915.
But we came to Sallisaw on our way home, and we went 30 miles from the city of Sallisaw, where we got what they call the eternal fire. We used to hear about this fire when we were little kids. That was taken away when the Cherokees were removed. And we always thought that it was just burning on the top of the ground, but we found out different. The caretaker of that place, Chief Stump Smith, told us when the Cherokee first arrived at that place, they dug a hole in the ground about 4 feet, and they had big logs crossed up all around each way, and the timber was several different kinds, and they built their fire under it, and the fire had been gone all these times. And we took with us from here a big bucket, tow sack full of hemlock bark, put fire in it, and we brought it to Cherokee.
By the bridges and the ball fields, in restaurants and at service stations, these visitors meet and see Cherokee men, women, and children who have come by foot, by pickup truck, or by car, from their cove and mountainside homes in Big Cove, Bird Town, Paint Town, and Yellow Hill, to work, buy groceries, talk with friends, or to watch the tourists. By the side of this busy highway in a new concrete block church, a Cherokee man reads the 23rd Psalm in Sunday school.
Yehovah, Awajeli, Ahawi, Diktia, Asa, Yegon Kenigo Shahesti, Itze, Kanula Shan, Agin Shansko, Nasking, Agtinisho, Ulstedla.
And up the mountain, tucked at the end of a footpath, unseen to the visitor's eye, in a cabin, a Cherokee woman sings as she does hearthwork, beating pieces of leather at home by her fireplace hearth to return to the Cherokee moccasin factory for assembly and shipping to more than 40 states. And from the bus station, a young Cherokee leaves for military duty in the Army or Navy of his country, which did not grant him citizenship until 1924. And in the valley, men and women report to their jobs at a modern brick structure that employs them on a 40-hour week, making quilted crib and chair covers for the standard market. A young Cherokee woman types in the office of the federal agency as a civil service worker. A school bus makes its frequent stops with its load of loud and happy children coming home from learning. And the tourists pass, not noticing, or with only a questioning smile, the signs that mark the district boundaries of Bird Town, Paint Town, Wolf Town, or Big Cove, seeing only the one that they know, Cherokee, North Carolina. For nowhere is there a village town hall, no evidence of the self-governing of the Qualla boundary, except the small volunteer fire station with the police station at the back.
Now, the tribal council that we maintain here functions about the same as your city council. Every 4 years we elect a principal chief and a vice chief by popular vote, and then every 2 years we elect 12 council members to represent the people in these meetings, and then from our own tribal treasury we maintain our own police, fire, and sanitation departments.
The elected chief and the elected tribal council, which represent the several districts of the Qualla boundary, govern democratically, as the Cherokee have governed themselves for more than 150 years. Yes, here are the sounds, the continuous quiet sounds that flit across the mind when the hardness of reality needs softening a bit. But the way has been hard for these quiet people, the Cherokee, as down through the years they have struggled. Those who bear the name of Owl, Squirrel, Crow, Running Wolf, Young Deer, Teesa-Tusky, Hornbuckle, Ross, Thompson, Sequoia. descendants of men who were living and hunting in the Smokies in 1540, when De Soto marched through in search of gold, who built homes and lived in peace, and suffered the westward surge of the land and gold-greedy white man, who saw the nation divided by that disastrous trail of tears, and who still live their belief in peace, in love, and the brotherhood of all men. The Sound of Cherokee, an everlasting sound which must not be forgotten.
Now you may follow the 85 symbols in the Cherokee syllabary printed on the back of your record jacket as they are pronounced by a Cherokee man who still speaks only his native tongue.
A, G, Ka, Pa, La, Ma, Na, Na, Qua, Sha, She, Da, Ta, Tla, Tla, Ja, Wa, Ya, A, Ge, He, Le, Mi, Ne, Na, Que, She, Te, Te, Tle, Che, We, Ye, I, Ki, He, Li, Mi, Ni, We, Si, Di, Te, Pli, Si, We, Yi, O, Go, Ho, Lo, Mo, No, Quo, Sho, Do, Tlo, Cho, Wo, Yo, U, Gu, Hu, Lu, Mu, Nu, Ku, Su, Du, Tlung, Chu, Wu, Yu, Ga, Ha, La, Na, Qua, Sha, Da, Tla, Ja, Wu, Yung.